Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and this is the podcast where we watch every single episode of G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, the cartoon, in sequential order and comment on it Mystery Science style. You are all in for a special treat. Today we've got a very, very talented, up-and-coming, prominent creator in the up-and-coming comic industry, and I mean that in all sincerity because your book really hit with a hammer, my man. Like, it was fantastic, and I saw a lot of fandom react to it in a real positive way. The book I'm talking about is Spencer and Locke from Action Lab Comics, and my guest is my friend David Pepose. David, welcome to Joe on Joe.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm very excited to have you. I first met you at a signing at Golden Apple, and I thought your personality and your exuberance was over the top delightful.
Well, thank you so much. It was. I've tried all my stable jobs, and I wound up into comics, and so I got to push as hard as humanly possible to get people to buy this book.
Yeah, and you're pushing well, and so I wanted to reach out to you, and I didn't because I'm terrible at following up on that. But then other people that I knew and just talked with as life went on, your name kept popping up with, oh yeah, we're doing a panel with David Pepose, and we're doing this, and oh David, and just doing it, and I was hearing it from all the right people that you were a great dude, and I was like, oh, that wasn't just an aberration. Like, that was.
Don't believe anything they say.
Yeah, and then I was kicking myself. I'm like, I could have been on the ground floor of a friendship, and here we are. So I'm really happy to have you.
The door's open for friendship anytime.
Oh my God, it's all preamble to say I honestly am happy to have you on the show.
Well, thank you.
Because I really do admire your work, ladies and gentlemen. If you've never read or heard of Spencer and Locke, go down to your local comic shop and get it. The collection is out. There is a second volume that's scheduled to hit the stands next April. Mm-hmm. It'll be in Diamond Previews in February. And David, why don't you tell us a little bit about how would you describe what Spencer and Locke is?
The easy elevator pitch for Spencer and Locke is, what if Calvin and Hobbes grew up in Sin City? It's about a hard-boiled detective whose partner's his childhood imaginary friend. It's a little True Detective, it's a little Fight Club, and it's 100% a love letter to classic Bill Watterson and Frank Miller. Our first volume of Spencer and Locke very much delved into sort of our dark little parody of the Calvin and Hobbes mythology. And for Volume 2, we're going full fables with it. Every comic strip is fair game for parody now, and our central villain is going to be our little riff on Mort Walker's Beetle Bailey, named Roach Riley.
Really?
Yes.
I love this. It's the first I'm hearing of this.
If you like The Dark Knight, Heath Ledger's Joker, imagine if Heath Ledger's Joker had survived the events of The Deer Hunter. That's what we've got coming with Roach Riley. He's really going to kind of push Spencer and Locke even further than we had in the first arc. Their relationship is going to be tested in a lot of ways. And you're going to see some surprising side characters pop up to sort of help out. This is our Empire Strikes Back.
Oh yeah,
and I don't bring up the Holy Trilogy lightly. This is on a much bigger scale from our first volume, and I'm really excited with how it's turning out so far.
That's fantastic to hear. I love that. Is this, since you said Empire Strikes Back, you're planning this as a trilogy?
I would like to. I will say our publisher has said as long as our sales are not in the toilet, they would be open to doing a third volume. So I tell everybody, come this February, tell your local comic shop to pre-order Spencer and Locke 2 because those really will make or break whether or not we'll get a volume 3. I promise you, though, by the time you finish volume 2, you guys are going to be mad at me for volume 3 not being ready. So I think this is something you're really going to want to see.
Your cohort on that wonderful book is Jorge Santiago Jr.
Oh, man, he's the next big superstar. He is fantastic. I'm so glad I met Jorge on the ground floor. I always say he's a little Becky Cloonan, a little Raphael Albuquerque. He's kind of got that very fluid manga-influenced style. But he also he's not only just fantastic with the action sequences, but he does really superb emotional work. That's the thing that he and I really clicked on early on is we like making our readers cry. Mm-hmm. Not in a bad way, but for Volume 1, we made our editor cry twice.
Wow.
And I'm hoping for Volume 2 we get a couple of those moments as well.
Oh, how many more family members do they have that you can kidnap?
I know, right?
You didn't specify how you made them cry.
Yeah. Give me a volume 3 or your family gets it.
Volume 3, you have a dog, right?
Yeah.
Goldfish.
But yeah, I mean, I love kind of tearjerker things. I'm a religious watcher of This Is Us. And that's sort of the thing that Jorge and I really keyed in on. And we've got some big moments in store for volume 2. I'm already thinking about volume 3. So
that's exciting. Well, I think that to hear you say that you're there for the emotional stuff is so key, because what you're riffing off, Calvin and Hobbes, is such an emotional comic strip. I think there's a lot of us out there that I didn't actually grow up with it as a kid. I found it older as an adult. My first exposure was the collection Something Under the Bed is Drooling.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't know what this is, but I love it. But it wasn't in my local paper, or at least I never saw it.
Interesting.
So I never really read it until I got to college.
So I grew up with Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah.
I'm from St. Louis, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch town. And so Calvin and Hobbes was in our daily newspaper. And my mother used to cut out all the strips, and she'd put them all over the house. And it's so interesting when you read it as a kid versus revisiting it as an adult. When you see it as a kid, you're like, oh, this is cool. It's funny. When you see it as an adult, you realize just how trailblazing and pioneering that Bill Watterson was.
Amazing.
And that was kind of the real synthesis behind the project, because this is the sort of book that could have devolved into some sort of edgelord nonsense pretty quickly, I think. And, and when I was thinking about this original concept, I went through a number of different kind of dark, gritty mashups. And the problem is all you get is kind of that initial
shock.
Premise. Yeah, the initial shock. And that doesn't...
It's 90% of the what-if stories that Marvel did.
Yeah, and that doesn't have... That works for a single issue.
Right.
It doesn't really work for anything sustainable. But when I thought of mashing up old school Frank Miller with Calvin and Hobbes, that's when things started clicking, because then I started thinking, okay, if this is about a cop whose partner is a 7-foot-tall imaginary panther... What was his home life like? And then you suddenly start diving into that, and you're saying, okay, what kind of scars does he carry? What kind of misconceptions does he have about himself?
Yeah.
And suddenly you start tapping into some real stuff. I've had a lot of readers come up to me and say, I grew up in an abusive household, and this really touched close to home. And not in a bad way. They felt a real sense of relief and catharsis from it. And that was huge for me. I mean, my parents love me, I mean they were wonderful parents. But I think approaching this with like a sense of empathy, I think kind of gives this concept a little more depth than what you might expect for it's just gritty Calvin and Hobbes. It's also kind of a story about trauma and childhood abuse and mental illness, and what are the lengths that your mind will go to protect itself from harm.
Yeah.
And in that regard, I mean, this is a dark story, but I think that the character of Locke specifically, he winds up, I think he fills a lot of people with hope. And
Locke is the Calvin analog.
Yes.
And Spencer is the Hobbes analog.
Yep.
Did you choose those names because Calvin and Hobbes are based off the thinkers?
Yep.
The
philosophers.
Are Spencer Locke based off of?
Yes.
Was Locke the one from that was modeled from Lost, right?
Yes. And Spencer,
John
Herbert Spencer was a philosopher. He actually came up with the phrase "survival of the fittest."
Oh, really?
Yeah. There are two philosophers that actually a lot of debate teams wind up citing. Some of this was happy coincidence, where I at first I just found philosopher names and I just kind of put them together just to see how they would sound. And Spencer and Locke had kind of a ring to it. And it wasn't actually until our first issue came out that somebody said, "Oh, were you in Debate Club?" Because those are two philosophers that we talk about a lot. And I was like, yes, exactly,
you
exactly
punch him
that.
like, no, nerd.
Yeah. But Bill Watterson did the same thing where he used these philosopher names and he let his characters have a real point of view.
Yes.
Some of it kind of a subversive point of view, which I think a lot of people tend to forget. They think of Calvin and Hobbes as this instantly wholesome book.
No.
But, I mean, there was, the newspapers got upset when they had a strip of deers shooting office workers, sort of a reversal on the usual hunting trip. And there was a real subversive streak to it, and that was something that I think we got to lean into a little bit with our story.
He's the Steve Ditko of newspaper.
Yeah,
animation,
absolutely,
you know?
absolutely.
Like, in both personality, seemingly, and in content, it was a huge influence on me. I did a strip in college myself, and,
nice.
and I was doing it the week that they finished publication, like his final strip
Wow.
was. So I did my characters in his style to as an homage to it.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and then I eventually got a hold of the complete collection of everything, and it's fascinating. It's just such an amazing. The whole thing is just so good.
He's a real his willingness to experiment with style is something that I really kind of keyed into, and I think that's the thing he has in common with Frank Miller.
Yeah.
I think Frank's politics have metamorphosized a lot in recent years, but I would say that as an artist, he's always about sort of doing experimentation with layouts in terms of pacing. I mean, he was a student of Will Eisner, and it shows. And whereas Watterson, I think he experimented a lot with form. You have scenes where Calvin has turned into a cubist version of himself.
Yes.
Or the Spaceman Spiff strips, or the things he would do with watercolors.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that really kind of made me so excited when I thought of this premise was, it gives us a license to kind of play around with the form and structure of comics. I think, so often it's just people see it as, this is the medium, and, it's not that different from an illustrated storyboard in a lot of times.
Right. Well, it's a language.
Yeah.
It's a language. And what Watterson did, I'm sure he meant it consciously, but subconsciously to the reader, is he gave the reader all these visual tricks or clues to allow them to access these fantastical sides of his brain and stay in the reality of it. The transmogrifier, the visual clues of when, just simply when Hobbes would be a stuffed animal.
Yep.
It would boom, boom, little pops, little there. Yes, narrative because someone else in the room, but it's a shift of mental thinking in that panel.
Yep.
And then you go back to the reality of, to his reality. Yeah, and he did it so well, but it is all just language.
Yes, and I'm very much a process nerd. I used to have a column at Newsarama called Writer's Workshop and Artist Alley.
Very cool.
I would interview writers and artists that I liked, and just basically said, "How did you wind up being you?"
Yeah.
And it was Greg Pak, actually. Who,
I love his writing.
He's superb. I
never
got
had a chance to meet him.
I got to see him at the Ringo Awards this year at Baltimore Comic-Con, and I got to thank him because an interview I did with him was really the thing that kind of opened up the floodgates for me. I was a DC Comics intern about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I didn't really know what I wanted to do out of that. It was during the recession. There were no jobs.
This was in New York.
Yes, this was in New York before they moved to Burbank. And I thought maybe I'd be an editor. I took a class on comic book editing. That kind of scared me straight. So I worked as a reviewer at Newsarama for years, really 10 years at Newsarama, just sort of, keep my toe in the industry, but not really sure what to do about it. And Greg was the one that said, as a writer, I gave myself permission to suck. I wrote a whole bunch of terrible things that were terrible, but every time I'd finish it, I'd get a little bit better. And then after a while, suddenly I was writing stuff that I actually felt good about. And I've thought about that conversation every single day since.
Great.
It took a few years to sort of get the courage to try it. But I spent about 3 months just writing shorts every single day. I would write 5 to 8 pages. It didn't matter how bad the concept was. I would just keep writing. And once, after 3 months of that, between that and writing reviews and being able to analyze comics, I suddenly was like, oh, okay, I'm kind of liking what I'm writing. And, I started writing screenplays and I started writing teleplays. And Spencer and Locke was the first comic script that I wrote the first issue in about 2 days. And I said, I love this. I want to write more. And so I wrote the rest of the treatment in about a week.
And how do you go about finding Jorge?
Yeah. So, Jorge, I stole a page from Justin Jordan's playbook. Justin Jordan, the writer of many books, including The Strange Talent of Luther Strode.
Yes.
And that was Justin's breakout book. And I said, oh, well, I want a breakout book like that. And, his secret weapon was he had Trad Moore. You find yourself an artist that makes you look really, really good. Trad was an art school graduate. He was from, I believe, the Savannah College of Art and Design. And I said, oh, well, those are the places I should be looking. So I looked at all the different arts colleges. I looked at the Kubert School, SVA, SCAD, RISD, just to name a few.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked for anybody who went online and posted that they had a portfolio from these schools. And I messaged quite a number of people. But Jorge, I kind of knew immediately when I found his portfolio, oh, this is the guy. He had a real fluidity to his action sequences, but he also really had an emotional side to him. And that's the thing that he and we come from very different backgrounds in terms of our introductions into comics. He's very manga influenced.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up on a steady diet of superheroes.
Yeah.
The thing that we overlap on the most is we want to make our readers cry. We love
sensing a trend here.
Yeah.
Readers, editors.
Yeah, we love the sort
You
of
came
these,
in here peeling onions everyone.
yeah, we love the emotional side, and that is, I think, the thing that kind of keeps us on an even keel.
Yeah.
I think we really do kind of bring the best of both worlds to this book, and he's an artist. He is freakishly talented. I throw so much stuff at him because I know he can handle it, and he just his growth just from volume 1 to volume 2 is incredible. I mean, he is just really pulling out all the stops here, and honestly, I mean, I can't wait to see the differences between volume 1 and, God willing, we get a volume 3. I'd love to see just his transformation as an artist just since then.
I have every faith that you will get a volume 3. I know it sold out at Golden Apple out
Mm-hmm.
here. I know it sold really well. I have absolute full confidence that they'll sign you up for volume 3. And are there other projects that you're working on that we can maybe talk about?
So, well, I have another project that's coming out through. That's coming out next year. That'll be coming out probably in the summer, right after Spencer and Locke 2 wraps. Okay. I can't say too much about it other than I'm taking a stab at a rom-com. But I think it still shares enough of that sense of humor from Spencer and Locke.
Comedic vehicle starring Rom the Space Knight.
I mean, it'll be it'll be interesting. The art is actually
Rom can't afford his rent, so he invites a couple of dire wraiths to move in with him. What could go wrong? I'm just kidding. It's a G.I. Joe podcast. We're going to make jokes about Rom.
It's I like to experiment a little bit, and I my next book, I wanted it to be something that people aren't really doing a whole lot of this.
Yeah.
I mean, you can.
So is it like old school romance comic, like
not
that kind
quite.
of rom-com?
It's still got a little bit of my mashup ethos.
I love it. Were you a fan of the Brubaker criminal stuff?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah,
very much so. I say Ed Brubaker was kind of like the third godfather of Spencer and Locke in a lot of ways. If you haven't read Last of the Innocent, he did a very similar thing to what we did, only with the Archie characters.
Correct. Wasn't there a Popeye one too?
Yes, I believe so. I fell in love with that book. I think I rated it my best book of the year when it came out. Yes, so I very much sort of in that same vein. That kind of helped inspire Spencer and Locke.
So does your spirit, like you're on the crime side of it?
Yeah.
Does it start with Frank Miller, or do you go back to like Raymond Chandler and like film noir stuff, like, or was that just like comic book wise a vehicle?
I'm a little reversed. My introduction to crime as a kid was Daredevil: The Man Without Fear.
Oh man,
yeah,
love it.
And that book was the book that made me realize that comics aren't. I mean, they are made by a team, but they're not made by committee, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There was an artist with, and a writer with very singular voices. And that kind of made me realize, like real people make these things. Mm-hmm. You can have this as a career. And then when I got older, my mother introduced me to The Godfather. And I was like, okay. And then Chinatown. And then kind of neo-noir like Memento and Brick, which are two of my favorite movies.
Oh, they're amazing. Brick's so good.
And it's funny because I had started on the comic side of crime and then kind of drifted away towards more movies. And then it wasn't until I started writing Spencer and Locke that I started kind of going back to those crime roots. I mean, there was Sin City, of course.
Of course.
And Frank's other work. I mean, Dark Knight Returns is pioneering work.
But just all Frank's Daredevil stuff is just one big noir
Yeah,
stretch. I mean,
exactly.
there's ninjas. There's obviously the Japanese aspect of it, but the rest of it's just crime and just women in peril and smoky detective offices and corrupt politicians, and it's great.
And so that was kind of, the other thing was when I started writing Spencer and Locke, part of the thing that had inspired me to do so at the time was I was kind of in a rut in terms of I didn't know what I wanted to do professionally.
Mm-hmm.
I remember sitting down with my father, and he told me once, he said, "What's the one thing that you can do that nobody else can do?" And I realized that was my voice. People can write, but nobody can write like I write.
Right.
But at the time, I also wasn't really vibing with any comics that were coming out at the time. There were very few that I was really interested in.
What years would this have been?
This would have been, I believe, 2014.
Okay.
So about 4 years ago.
All right.
Give or take a few months.
It was a dark time at DC. I know that.
Yes.
The New 52 had relaunched, and after the initial buzz, I think things were a little flat.
Yeah, things were a little flat. And,
Not to badmouth anyone or trash talk anyone.
No, but it was, and to be honest, it wasn't just them. I mean, it was just across the board.
Yeah.
I wasn't finding a lot that I was liking.
I think I agree, and I'm a big fan of the industry, kind of paying
Yeah.
attention to it and studying it and stuff. And I think that was the era of all the focus was on the movies.
Yeah.
And so the comics were trying to play catch up instead of what they had been, which were they were the leaders.
Yeah, the
they were
R&D.
the thought leaders for so many years.
Yeah.
Now it was, we got to put all our energy into making our comics like the movies, and that's kind of that mid-teens era. That might be what you were feeling.
And I wasn't vibing with a lot of stuff, and so I thought, well, maybe I should put my money where my mouth is. If I've been writing reviews of books for all these years, maybe I should try to do one on my own and see how easy that is, tough guy. And I feel like, I interned at DC. I studied creative writing and theater. I wrote reviews for years, and that was all barely enough to get me over the finish line for my first book. It's so hard. I feel like even the people you think are probably phoning it in, they're
working hard.
They're working hard on it, and even if one person on the team maybe isn't putting in what you would consider to be 100%, I guarantee everybody else is.
Yeah.
It's
one of the reasons why the paydays for some of these larger scale ventures can be so lucrative, because so many people fail and invest so much time, money, and energy to getting to that point. Yeah. That all that work is behind the scenes. You never see it.
Mm-hmm,
so
absolutely.
I was I don't begrudge anyone their success, because I know that even for every one person that maybe didn't work very hard, 100 people who are at that level worked their tails off and deserve every ounce of respect and gratitude.
And especially on on the indie levels, there are so many people who are trying to get their foot in the door.
Yes.
And people are working for no money or little money. And they're just hustling as hard as they can, and the sad part is that so many books. I mean, we've been very fortunate that we've had a really long shelf life. Part of this is because we do a lot of conventions.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done, I think, 10 or 11 cons this year.
Yeah.
And that's I'd say fairly light compared to some people I know.
Do you find a reception at the cons? Do people know you, or are you introducing the book to people?
It's a little column A, a little column B. It depends on where it is. Local cons, I'm seeing more and more people who know me and know the book and are saying, "When's Volume 2 coming out?" They're like, "I want Volume 2 now," and I'm like, "Good things take time. I promise. The artwork's gonna look so good, it'll be totally worth it." But anytime I go to a new city, I sell out.
It's great.
And I'm not talking small numbers. I'm talking we can usually sell anywhere from 80 to 100 plus copies in a weekend.
Crazy.
But the thing is, that's not the reality for most books.
Right.
Most books, they come out, they have a very kind of short shelf life, and beyond that, it's kind of done. So I've been really, I've been very thankful for our fan base who has been so passionate about this book. And I think it speaks to, we're standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, and also I think Action Lab, them a big shout out here. They're doing a lot of good work with supporting a lot of up and comers. Friend of the show, Dave Schrader, with Baby Badass.
Yep.
I know Zombie Tramp is doing really well for them.
They keep the lights on for us.
Yeah.
Action Lab has been a terrific publisher for us because I think and you know what, I would say I know most publishers would have freaked out a little bit at how much we pushed the envelope on this book. And I give Action Lab so much credit. First off, Dave Dwanch, who he was the one who pulled us out of the slush pile, and he immediately, within an hour of me emailing them, which is not how it usually works, said, "When can you get this book done?" He immediately kind of knew the value.
So how much did you have prepared before you sent it to him?
We had the first 6 pages and cover of issue 1,
okay,
which we didn't change. That's exactly what you guys got.
Cool.
And from the opening flashback to the scene of them in the diner, that's what Dave saw. And he immediately kind of keyed in, oh, this could be something.
Yeah.
And really the moment I saw Jason Smith's colors on Jorge's inks, I said, oh, this could definitely be something. But they've been great. I think in this day and age, it's very easy for publishers, especially when they want multimedia participation, to they'll kind of hold your hand a lot, and they'll sort of oversee things, and to a degree that's good to keeping sort of things from going off the rails, but sometimes I think that can kind of stagnate the creativity of it all. And Action Lab was they just said, tell your story the way you want to tell it, we trust you. And as a first-time writer, that was...
It's code for the editor's really busy.
It was
There's
huge.
a lot of other stuff I don't have time.
Yeah, and the fact that Action Lab let us tell the story we wanted to, the way that they let us promote the story we wanted to. They've been terrific partners with us, and I think the book wouldn't be the book, let alone as good as the book is, if we had a different publisher.
It's great. And so listeners, go to your local comic shop, ask them for a copy of Spencer and Locke. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it anywhere you find your comic books, really.
Anywhere comics are sold.
And then tell them it'll be in the February previews. So the for April release. So the actual catalog that comes out in February, get Spencer and Locke. It's called Spencer and Locke 2.
Yep.
Get that on your pull list, guys. Get it ordered early so that the numbers come in, so they get the right message is sent to Action Lab. Then go online and find David at Pepose, Pepposed. That's on Twitter. Is there a website?
Yeah. Well, actually, Spencer and Locke also has its own Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram accounts. It's Spencer and Locke. It's just one word.
Awesome.
No underscores or ampersands. And yeah, you can find all the latest news of Volume 2. We'll be ramping that up more in January and February once we're closer to previews.
Awesome. And I know so many of you guys love comics, so I know you're going to love this message from our sponsor.
Joe and Joe listeners know that I love comic books, G.I. Joe, pop culture, and my wife and dogs are pretty great too. I also love learning how people get to where they're at and where they're going. All of that comes together over at the Dreamer Comics podcast, except for my family stuff. That'd be really weird. Omar Spahi interviews someone from the comic industry every episode, and they break down the journey that creator took to get from reading comics to creating them. Comic luminaries like Jim Valentino, Ross Ritchie, Kyle Higgins, and so many more can be found at DreamerComicsPodcast.com or find them anywhere you get your podcasts. Everyone has a dream. Learn how to make yours a reality.
And while you're on the internet, go to @JoeOnJoePod. Find me on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook. Send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Let me know what you think of the show. Let me know if you want to be a guest on the show. Welcome all comers. We're nearing the end of the ride here. We've only got a few episodes left. It's one of the reasons why I was excited to get you on here, David.
I'm excited.
We are watching an episode today called A is for Android.
Oh, perfect. I love it.
It is actually a lot of fun. General Hawk gets replaced by an android, and it's kind of funny, and it's kind of fun.
I can't wait. I'm so excited.
What's real quick, what's your history with G.I. Joe?
Oh, boy. I mean, it's funny. I watched it a lot as a kid. It's funny. My parents were not big action figure people. But my buddy Nick, or I guess he goes by James now, he was huge into all the action figures, and so he kind of lorded over me a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was always. I mean, this sounds super basic to say. I mean, of course, if you say you don't like Snake Eyes, like I feel like you're lying.
Come on,
Like,
no, you're talking to the number one front runner lover right here. I love Snake Eyes. He's my favorite. He's the best.
He's the guy. And so I feel like he was like the real sort of icon for my generation, at least. And yeah, no, I always think about G.I. Joe, Real American Hero. I just think about that theme song. Like it brings me back to when I was like 7 years old. Yeah, and then of course, the pork chop sandwiches redubbing. That was as a teenager.
It's a
for
classic.
sure.
So, since you're a comic guy, were you a fan of the G.I. Joe comic books at all?
You know, I wasn't able to follow them as much as I would have liked to. I was too young to read the classic Marvel books, and the IDW books. I think because I wasn't as well versed in all of the mythos. It was very
it's
hard
pretty
for me to
soap opera-y.
Yeah.
It really is. It is like it's our stories.
Yeah.
You know, like it's so there's a lot of military action, but it's drama.
And I
can't believe you killed this person and boo boo boo.
Yeah. But what I love is what they were doing is sort of expanding it as like a Hasbro universe.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're seeing the G.I. Joes with the Transformers.
Oh, the recent stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, or with Mask. And I mean,
the Mask is the perfect.
Yeah.
It's the perfect synergy between those two.
I love mashups. That's my aesthetic. It's the reason that all of my books are a mashup of some kind. And that was the sort of stuff that I was like, oh, this is like wild bonkers comic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the kind of wild bonkers comic stuff that I'm really into. So I've been getting back into it a little bit lately. And you know, while it's a lot to take in and I'm not 100% sure I'm always following it, it's been pretty cool, wild stuff.
That's very cool. Well, get ready because we're going to watch it. I want to find out more about your career prior to this as a newspaper man.
Yeah.
He's a newspaper man, see?
Deadline, come on.
Deadline.
Hold the presses.
Stop the presses. We're going to find out more about that. And so, listeners, please get your DVDs ready. And we're watching A is for Android. It is on DIC Season 2, Disc 2. So here we go. So look at this exciting cold open, right? Not what you expect from a cartoon in the 90s.
No.
We're in the 90s now.
Is this the base from Pride of the X-Men?
It could be. And everyone speaks in Wolverine's awkward Australian accent. That's exactly right. So we've got some sand vipers.
Okay, let's show them
They're
who's boss here.
infiltrating the Joe
you were
base.
joking.
Oh, no, I'm not joking. This is the animation's not that great in the DIC.
He just got attacked by a cactus.
It's ambush. That is ambush. Ambush is literally a guy that ambushes people. And so they have him hiding in a cactus to ambush that guy.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's
What?
Wow, what? Okay, that's Pathfinder. And he was hiding in a cactus? Like
everybody's hiding in a cactus. This is insane.
But they're all actually there is Snake Eyes. That
There he
is
is.
that version of Snake Eyes. He is in this. I'll say this. I think Destro and Cobra Commander look amazing in this.
I love Cobra Commander's voice.
Yes, Chris Latta. He's fantastic. They look really good in this. I think we've talked about this era of Joe where the design was good, but the animation was always a little lacking. I think this episode actually works pretty well from an animation perspective.
This expression on Destro's face. I feel like we're all Destro.
Yeah, we are all Destro. Hashtag we're all Destro. And here comes
General Hawk.
what?
What's he doing here?
A perfect doppelganger of General Hawk?
Our General Hawk, the ultimate weapon to destroy the Joes once and for all.
So Cobra was playing with a lot of robots at the time, right? They had bats, battle android troopers, and this is, although actually he technically didn't say it there, that's a robot General Hawk, is what that is.
Wow.
It's a complete android General Hawk that they're going to use to infiltrate the Joe team. So this was this aired in it was 91 or 92. Forgive me for blanking on that right now. How old are you about
I
then?
was 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah.
Depending.
Yeah, so this was probably a little over your head at the point.
This is like some Kenny Loggins.
Yeah,
Like
it really is.
just watch them laugh at these people running like.
Just laughing at people getting shot and
that's
blown
amazing.
up. Yeah, it's absolutely killer.
I think I do remember this theme song, actually, now that you mention it. This definitely sounds familiar.
It's catchy, and I would be lying if I'd said, like, throughout my life, especially because I'm obviously doing this podcast, if this theme song doesn't just run through my head at least 2 or 3 times a day.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because it's very catchy. Get a nice group shot. It's the whole team member. And we got A is for Android. It's written by Sandra Ryan.
Shout out to you, Sandra.
Shout out. Cobra's base looks pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Always adorned with the Cobra logo, which makes me think it would be easy to pick up on satellite. But
Perfect replica of the Joe's
maybe
leader.
maybe
And
not.
he'll obey your every order to the letter.
Now,
Splendid.
what they do with
Use him right
Hawk
away.
here
Not
is
yet.
great.
I've still got a few bugs to work
Because
out.
Destro's working on his sense of humor. And that's
Destro tells me my sense of humor still has some quirks.
what I'm talking about.
Doesn't everyone? We are all Cobra Commander.
The fatal flaw in this is that his sense of humor is broken. So now we're introduced to a little boy named Adam who can't get out of high school, and we're going to quickly learn why.
Is he trapped in high school?
Well, we don't really learn who Adam is in relation to Hawk, although he's sitting on his lap, which is
Wow.
awkward.
Hey,
And
watch
watch,
that.
listen.
You'll make it fire.
What?
Fire what?
You can't read, can you?
Adam's illiterate.
Says fire.
What?
I don't know who Adam is. They never established how Adam's related to Hawk. Is he a friend? Is he? I don't know. But he's sitting on General Hawk's lap, and he's illiterate.
Yeah.
That's what I know about this moment in time.
General Hawk's lack of eyes, like with the sunglasses, makes it a little weirder.
It's very disturbing. And frankly, this
It
is...
only looks like a harmonica.
Yeah. He's also... Right. He's also... There's...
That kid could have cut his lips off.
Cut his face off. There's so much innuendo in this opening scene.
Yeah.
Of
What?
Sitting on his lap. He's about to touch a stick. Don't touch it, it'll fire. You can't read. Oh, hey, dummy. Here's a harmonica that you blow into. Oh, not really a harmonica. It's a Swiss Army knife.
That's not what we thought it was.
There's a lot happening here. And now this kid is they're caught in an attack by
In an
Cobra.
active war zone.
Yeah, an active war zone.
This kid's got Wolverine
Still,
hair.
yeah, it's still not
They
established.
shot that microphone off his lapel.
Yes, Cobra has excellent aim when it doesn't count. Actually,
Quick, Adam.
Do you
Take
know,
my jetpack and go back to base
did
for
you
help.
ever read the very first Robin miniseries, the one with Tim Drake?
Yeah, absolutely. Love
He's
that.
got Tom
yeah,
Lyle Robin
Yeah,
hair.
he does. Yeah, he does.
He's got
It's
Tom
like baby
Lyle Robin.
Wolverine hair.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what's cool about this little moment here, a little deep cut there. So this version of Hawk is, I think, technically the 4th version. So the first one was green shirt, then the second one was his bomber jacket. The 3rd version of Hawk, he was in like a spaceman outfit and he had a jetpack. That's what he just gave the kid.
What?
Right. Like but this is kind of like a deep cut for the show
Yeah.
to say reference his previous iteration came with a jetpack and he hands it to that kid to escape.
I hate to be a downer, but how's that kid going to know where he's going if he can't read?
How was it in life and in the desert, David? You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. So we're dealing with, and this is, by the way, this episode, this is hot on the heels of the anti-drug episodes of G.I. Joe. They're hitting all the heavy
Wow.
subject matter. You can't read. You're on drugs.
Yep.
Like, we're fixing the problems of the American youth here.
I mean, good for them, I guess. This is wild.
Yeah. Now, broad strokes, I love what they did. They waited till he got alone, ambushed him,
Yeah.
swapped him out with the android. That's all awesome.
Yeah.
It's just all these little pieces of it that are just
Yeah.
absolutely hilarious to me.
Yeah.
Oh, that, by the way, that's Bullhorn, who is the hostage negotiator for G.I. Joe. And he literally came with a bullhorn. That was his action. He came with a bullhorn. And he would be like,
Does
get
he
off
use-
the ledge, Cobra. Don't kill yourself.
Does he use his necklace of grenades for his hostage negotiations?
No, those are his ancient. He's Native American, so those are his like ancient spiritual.
Those
grenades.
aren't grenades.
Oh no, they are.
Oh
They
my
totally
gosh.
are.
Okay.
They totally are. But it's kind of weird that they give a tribal looking necklace to the Native American guy, but they're all grenades.
Oh my gosh.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a little weird.
Yeah. Who's this guy with the scope over his eye?
That is, I believe that's Psych Out,
Oh well, kid, make the most of it.
who is not experiencing an upgrade in looks.
Yeah.
His previous look was pretty awkward, but better than this one, if that tells you anything.
Boy, seeing these guys standing together, it's like an uncanny X-Men reunion.
Yeah,
of
right.
A whole bunch of costumes that don't go together.
No, they really don't.
That look only weirder the more of them you put together.
Wait, are you hearing this?
Wipe off that smirk, soldier. Answer me.
Hawk is telling
Well,
jokes
now I'm not absolutely sure, sir.
because they worked on his humor
Morse Toad.
chip
Get it?
was broken.
Morse Toad.
Come on, that's just funny.
Since when did
Come on.
General Hawk go
Yeah.
in for stupid jokes?
So it's his humor algorithm that's going to ruin this whole operation.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
you didn't laugh at my joke.
What's gotten into
No,
you?
now that's if we look closely,
Furthermore,
that's
I
stalker,
don't like
low
the way I
light.
was able to drive onto this base this morning. No security. No security at all. Anybody could break in. And what slows a vampire down?
Sir?
Tired blood, you idiot.
Okay, that's hilarious. Tired blood slows a vampire down. G.I. Joe has their own water tower. That's pretty exciting.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, did you ever have any of the G.I. Joe toys when you were a kid? You said your parents weren't big on action figures.
They
so
weren't. They weren't.
you got a Turtles shirt on. Were you a Turtles guy?
I was a Turtles guy. Huge Turtles guy. 90s cartoon was my introduction.
Yeah.
And then when I was...
It was so good. It was so good.
so good.
I was a little old for it, but so I was aging out of all this stuff.
Yeah.
But I was like, I like this show a lot.
When I was, I think 7 or 8, my mother got me the collected colored versions of the original Eastman and Laird ones, and I'm not gonna lie, it took a minute. Like I was like, whoa, this is way more gory and violent than my cartoons. But then after a little while, I was like, oh, okay, no, this is super rad.
Well,
like,
I love hearing that because that's a mashup,
Yep.
just like what you're doing.
Yep.
That's mixing Carl Barks and Walt Kelly
Yep.
with Daredevil.
Yeah, like it was very much. I mean, it was Titans, Daredevil, X-Men, all mashed up together.
Yeah.
And then and Ronin.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
It's Funny Animal Frank Miller.
I
Have you had a chance to meet Frank?
no, it's one of my big regrets. I've wanted to give him a copy of the book for ages, and Baltimore Comic-Con told me they gave him a copy, but I've never actually got to meet him face to face. Hopefully, it would break my heart if he hated it.
We'll be right back. Today's file card is on the G.I. Joe Marine, codenamed Leatherneck. His file name is Wendell A. Metzger. His primary military specialty is the infantry. His secondary specialty is drill sergeant. His birthplace, Stromberg, Nebraska. He's a grade gunnery sergeant. Leatherneck was the hardest gunny that ever slogged through the mud of Camp Lejeune. Before that, he was the toughest drill sergeant on Parris Island. Before that, he was the roughest tech sergeant of the 1st Recon Battalion in Vietnam. Before that, he was the meanest corporal in Gitmo. Civilian badness just don't count. Quote, he is uncouth, opinionated, and overbearing, and he has no patience at all with the indecisive, the lazy, and the dishonest. Not a man you can like, but one you can trust. This is one of those occasions, ladies and gentlemen, where the card 100% matches the character that we saw on the cartoon. They nailed Leatherneck's personality to a T. I loved the competition that he had with Wetsuit. He absolutely was everything that Larry wrote on this file card, assuming Larry wrote this file card. You know, he was mean, he was tough, he was perfect to a T Leatherneck. This is fantastic. I was a big fan of this character. It's funny because he's very simple as far as toys go. He's got a backpack and a rifle. That's it. But he looks really good. He's dressed in multicolored camouflage, which is great. He's got like grenades, got a knife on him. He's kind of simple when it comes to figures, you know, like he's not very intricate at all. And yet he's got enough detail to keep me coming back. I think also just his personality on the show was so infectious and so fun.
to watch his banter with Wetsuit. It's just absolutely dynamic. So I love Leatherneck. I think Leatherneck was a great figure, and I think he was fantastic on the show. It's funny, go to Leatherneck version 3 in 1993, and his look goes off the rails terrible. But then they bring it back for his other versions of the toy. It's like 1993, everyone made a lot of bad choices. So Leatherneck, Wendell A. Metzger, we salute you. Well, I can't imagine a world where he hates it. They do say, though, never meet your heroes.
I know, right?
My personal comic spiritual spirit animal is Walter Simonson.
Mm-hmm.
And I chose that when I was a young boy, and not realizing that, luckily, as an adult, I learned that he and his wife are the nicest people
Super
in
nice.
the world.
I got to meet Louise at Baltimore this year.
Oh, yeah.
She spoke at the Ringo Awards.
Yes, she gave Mark the award.
And she couldn't have been a nicer, sweeter person. She is super lovely. I met Walt very briefly, actually, at the previous Baltimore, but Louise, we had like a nice 10-minute conversation, and she was just couldn't be more gracious.
I lucked out with that, being that's what I chose as a child to gravitate my brain to, because if it, let's say I had been a massive fan of, I would not put anyone on blast, but someone just grow up and they're just a massive ego and they're a giant jerk. That I don't know how I would feel about that. As an adult, going, I kind of have to not like that person now. So
I've been fortunate that I didn't really get to know a lot of names until I started interning, and so
what did you do at DC?
I was an editorial intern. I worked on Batman R.I.P., Final Crisis,
Great,
Green Lantern: Secret Origin.
Love it.
So it was a really fantastic time.
It's a funny story about that Secret Origin one, the collection, the one with Ryan Reynolds on it. I've had more than one customer. Now it's no longer obviously in print, but they made a lot of them. More than one customer go, do you have another copy without him on it?
Yeah, without Ryan Reynolds.
And I had to explain, it's the same book.
Yeah.
They go, yeah, but
we don't want to look at his face.
The movie was bad.
Yeah.
I was like, no, but the book is the same. You're giving this.
It was. It was. Yeah.
It's a great
a
book,
great
though,
book.
man. Kudos to you.
And so I was there about 9 months. It was during the recession.
Yeah.
So thankfully, I met Janelle Asselin. She had just joined as the Batman assistant editor, and so she was a Newsarama alum, and she connected me with her editors there. And I wound up rising the ranks and becoming the reviews editor there.
Awesome.
And so I got to meet a lot of people sort of as I came of age. So I took a writing class with. He was kind of an unknown writer. You probably haven't heard of him. His name is Dan Slott.
No. Has he done anything?
So I learned characterization from the guy who wound up writing Amazing Spider-Man.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Real quick. The illiterate Adam has now snuck back onto because Cobra infiltrated the Joe base, and Adam is he wants to sign up with Cobra.
What?
He thinks illiteracy, they've got room in their slot for a world of illiteracy.
Well, it's also because they label everything with a cobra instead of
Cobra's got the
words.
best branding.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no words.
Yeah.
It's
It's just cobras.
good cobra, bad cobra. Don't touch. It's biting cobra. See, there's look at all these.
Prison. Where's the prison? If I could only read those signs.
Oh, that's right. He can't read those signs.
Can't
That's
read
right.
Furnace.
Oh my God, he can't read the sign that says. Oh my God, what is that furnace?
How does that furnace work? Why
How
would they
is
have a
it
door like
functional?
that?
Why would there be a door with it just says open fire?
Yeah.
What is going on?
That's not how furnaces work.
No. This is fantastic that his illiteracy is a plot point for his actions in the show. I love that.
Grab him!
No, he told me.
So great. So he's trying to find General Hawk, the real General Hawk, to break him out.
Yeah.
Turns out this is what happens to people when they don't learn how to read. That's the lesson, kids. And now you know, and knowing half the battle.
That's amazing.
So you also worked in newspapers.
Yeah, I was a newspaper reporter for years. I studied that in college.
Where'd you go to school?
Brandeis University, just
nice.
outside of Boston, Waltham, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've been to Waltham many times.
I did a lot of journalism. I was on the college paper. I interned all over the country.
Real quick point for listeners: Hawk has a ring. Duke had a ring.
apparently they only give those special rings to like their top leaders. They don't care enough about the grunts. Duke used to have a ring that had a little locator in it, and they used it in a couple of different episodes.
What?
And I was always like, well, why doesn't every Joe have a locator? Because
Yeah.
they're always getting kidnapped, but
Yeah.
only Duke had it. And now we see Hawk has a special ring that does stuff. So apparently you have to be real special.
You have to be real special
Yeah.
to get a tracking device.
Yeah. So you worked out of Waltham.
Yeah, so I wound up when I graduated from college, and I had interned at DC. There was no jobs. There was
Yeah.
no jobs in New York.
Yeah.
So actually, I wound up. I became a newspaper reporter at the Berkshire Eagle in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. It was great. It's the best first job I could have had. I covered state politics. I covered crime. I covered
Nice.
breaking news. And the Berkshires are an interesting place because it's a resort town for Massachusetts and New York, in upstate New York. But for everybody who's living there 24/7, it's like wealthy people next to like abject poverty.
It's the TV show Ozarks.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a big drug presence there. The Crips from the bigger cities would actually
Really?
send sort of their up and coming recruits to the Berkshires because they figured the law enforcement there, the heat would be a little less on them there. It was like a Crips internship program.
Wow.
So there was drugs, there was violence. But it was a great job. It was between that
Were there any Kennedys?
no, not that I'm aware of. I think because that was like elsewhere in the state that you think but it was interesting. I mean, there's Tanglewood.
Tanglewood, what's that mean?
Tanglewood was where the Boston Symphony Orchestra would play. James Taylor would play there every summer.
So crime went through the roof
Yeah,
when
crime-
James Taylor fans would
It was
roll into
like-
town
it
and be
was-
like, "Let's take this over."
Yeah,
it was like the movie The Wild Ones.
Yeah, it was like this.
G.I. Joe
We'll
will
be right
return.
back.
Hey, listeners, if you're anything like me, all apologies to your family. I'm just kidding. It's likely that they made you this way. No, I'm talking about that I'm always looking for more G.I. Joe content, and I think I've found it. Stop what you're doing. Okay, don't stop listening to this podcast. Okay, to multitask and go to Facebook/Special Mission Force. Brian Wilkins is curating all kinds of wonderful, nostalgic G.I. Joe content, including new pics from his fantastic Instagram page at Special Mission Force. On his Instagram, he's taking photos of Joes out in the wild, in the real world, doing stuff. For me, the two things that stand out the most are his variety of characters that he takes pictures of and like the depth of field in these pictures. It's just a wonderful job of directing focus for you. I think you really will enjoy his work. So like him on Facebook, follow him on Instagram and Twitter, and get ready for his website, specialmissionforce.com. He's a name to watch in the G.I. Joe game, so get on board now. Now back to the show.
It was very much, sometimes it was like very crunchy and granola and artsy. Like, they had like a bunch of dance troops, and then suddenly like, oh, somebody went to the hospital because he's got stitches across his face because snitches get stitches.
Well, that's so true.
Yeah.
If Adam never learns how to read, I hope he learns that lesson at least.
Yeah.
Snitches get stitches.
Snitches get stitches.
Did working in the newspaper, did that prepare you as a writer to just be faster,
Yes.
be nimbler? Like, what did that do for you?
It just meant that you don't get afraid of a deadline and you don't get afraid of a word count. Sometimes I would do sort of longer feature-y stories, and that kind of helped me kind of play around, experiment a little bit. But oftentimes it's just, okay, you got to write fast and you got to write X amount of space and you got to get it done.
Here we go. This is the great, you're the clone. No, I'm the clone. No, you're the clone moment of every,
Amazing.
You mean
Adam's eyelashes are really accentuated in that frame.
So we've got General Hawk meaning General Hawk.
Welcome back, General.
And here we go. The one Hawk.
The real Hawk would never send a boy into battle.
It's exactly it.
This is ridiculous.
How about the hawk that speaks with a mechanical echo?
Yeah. He's like, oh, goodbye.
How about that for a tip?
That's funny. How did the Cobra people
Do
know
you
it was
miss?
him?
Do you miss working for the newspaper?
I
at all?
do.
Like
You know,
that lifestyle.
I mean, I don't miss having to scrape to pay my bills, but I do miss, especially like in today's political climate, I miss kind of being in the trenches and
with daily affirmation too.
Yeah.
You get that constant hit where you do a comic, you get 3-4 months go by and it's you pushing something you've already created,
Yeah.
where you're getting an idea out there, you're getting a story out there, and it's instant reaction.
I mean, whereas newspapers, I mean, it's tough. It's very challenging, and I think there's a lot of overlap between journalists and detectives, and this is something I've mentioned to a few people, is that they're all trying to sort of hunt down the story, and granted, most reporters are not getting beaten up, and getting their noses cut like in Chinatown, but I think
if you're interested, I know some people if that makes you feel better.
But it's all about sort of you're finding the angle, and you're finding different ways to not just approach stories, but how are you finding stories? And so I miss it. I still keep in touch with all my former newspaper people.
Yeah.
My aunt was a copy editor at the Washington Post.
Did they do a big write-up about you when Spencer and Locke came out?
No.
What? Wait a minute.
I will say
that actually bothers me. How do you not do like local boy made good kind of a thing?
Well, I get it. Like I didn't grow up in the Berkshires. And
but you worked there
But I worked there for a few years, and I will say one of my hometown papers, the Riverfront Times, they're the alt paper of St. Louis. They did a really lovely write-up of us.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm trying to get the St. Louis Post-Dispatch to cover us for Volume 2. So,
we'll
paper, listen up.
Well, when you want us to push it, we'll push it. we'll like Twitter bomb them and stuff. Yeah,
thank you.
Get this guy's from your hometown. Let's get him on there. Yeah,
why
we'll do it.
why won't you cover this book?
And when we do, we'll use your code name that I'm going to ask you about right now. So on this show, I love to ask my guests, if you could be a member of the Joe or Cobra team, what would you be? And then what would your name be? So choose Joe or Cobra. Choose a specialty.
Villains are more fun. Cobra.
I love that.
Team Cobra
I
all
love
the way.
that. Too many people go Joe. They're like, I'm a good guy. In my head, I'm like, no, you're not.
I don't know. I mean, since you've been talking about the newspaper stuff, it's been bouncing in my head. You should just call me Muckraker.
Muckraker. I love it. And you're a Cobra news guy.
Yeah.
You're running the Fox
Cobra
News equivalent of Cobra News.
Oh no.
Well, I mean, what did you know?
Sky is green. Field at 11.
Yeah, I said that.
Yeah.
Not, that came out of my voice, and I'll take responsibility for that crack.
Yeah. Front page news. Adam can't read.
Everyone laughing at him.
He can't read his own hat.
I was just going to point that out. The irony. They give him a hat that says G.I. Joe on it, and he doesn't know what that word means.
Yeah, I could just say illiterate.
Oh, my gosh.
We don't know if Hawk winked dead and back or not.
No, we never
wearing his
really
blind
do.
man shades.
We never really do. So there we go. Adam helped save the day, and illiteracy is foiled once again. I mean, were you a big reader when you were a kid?
Absolutely. I was an only child until I was 9, and so when you have siblings, it's more built in.
Yeah.
The stimulation of talking with people, but it was just me and my parents for so long. So yes, I read a lot. What's funny is I split. I was reading a lot of prose, but I was also reading a lot of comics, and it took until I was in college for my parents to, I think, really realize that I wasn't just like wasting my time and rotting my brain cells. That this is very much. Comics are the language of visual literacy, and
totally.
It's not just comics. You can explore film and television and advertising and marketing. There's a lot you can get through with that.
All those things you described, they all at some point contain storyboards.
Yeah,
and storyboards are comic books.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
But I'm a third generation comics fan. My grandfather was a comics fan. My mother was a comics fan. And so I come by it honestly. My collections are probably a little bigger than theirs, but,
That's all right. We live in a collector generation.
Yeah.
You would have been coming of age right when that Image 90s stuff was blowing up in the early 90s, mid-90s. So I could see a lot of really, really bad comic books running through your hands.
There's a lot of Spawn.
Yeah.
A lot of Crimson.
A lot of Crimson.
Yeah, I loved those books. I missed the boat on Valiant. And so when Valiant came back, it took a little bit for me to warm up because it was sort of a nostalgia that I wasn't familiar with.
Yeah.
I mean, that sort of 90s boom. And then,
do you have a character at one of the big 2 or 3 that you really want to write?
Well, I mean, my cheat answer is I would always, team books, because Justice League and Avengers, I would. Yeah. I've got so many ideas for them. Beyond that, I would probably lean towards the magic characters, either Doctor Strange or Shazam. I've got ideas for those characters that would.
Well, you must know Jeff Johns from working on the Green Lantern Secret Origin.
I do know Jeff from my reviewing days.
Okay.
He I think he liked my reviews, and so we've kept in touch. He's a busy guy.
Oh, you think?
Yeah.
But he's writing that new Shazam series.
Yeah.
Maybe they have an 8-page backup.
Oh man, Jeff, if you're listening, I'll take that backup. Please, anything I can get. But I kind of like the Magic characters because for me, I kind of key into the rules very quickly.
Yeah.
I had an Iron Fist idea, which I guess I can spoil because Marvel just stepped on it with their new Old Man Quill announcement. But my idea was going to be...
Oh, they're doing an Old Man Quill series?
Old Man Quill with Ethan Sachs, wonderful guy. I wanted to do an Old Man Rand starring Iron Fist.
Oh,
and
cool.
And it was that they sent Iron Fist to space to find reinforcements. And he said, you're the expendable one. You're the one who it's not going to make or break the war effort if you leave.
Oh.
And your chi powers can cut a hole through time and space and get you to the Shi'ar Empire or get you to the Badoon. We need help, and don't come back until you get it. And the problem is, he goes off into space, and everybody says, Earth has been kind of an issue for a long time. Maybe we should just let them rot.
Yeah.
And so he winds up David Carradining through space, sort of Legend of Kung Fu.
Yeah.
Where he fights a Sicarian gladiator match. He fights Shi'ar gods. He says, all I want to do is die, or all I want is to find a good ending. But the dragon won't let me die.
Wow.
And
so how is Old Man Quill stepping on this?
So it's very much Ethan is taking a look at sort of space. How is space changed?
And he wrote Old Man Hawkeye, right?
Yes.
Old Man Hawkeye is dynamite.
It's fantastic.
If you're not reading Old Man Hawkeye, get it. It's really good.
And it's a smart idea. If you think that all the heroes died on Earth, well, what happens if Thor and Captain Marvel died on Earth? And we know for a fact that Thor dies.
Yeah.
Well, all those threats that they were supposed to stop don't get stopped anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of like this idea of exploring, well, what's the greater Marvel cosmic looking like now that all of Earth's heroes that stepped in to save the day are no longer doing so. And so, I was thinking you see an old Groot. It's sort of a Giving Tree kind of cover.
Oh, yeah.
Or my personal favorite idea was the Shi'ar had broken up the Macran crystal and the essence of the Phoenix, and it had planted it in a Darkhawk army.
Oh.
And so suddenly Iron Fist it's my dragon style versus your Phoenix style.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, listen, Marvel, you need to get David on these books.
Call me, guys. I'm available anytime.
He's available. Remember, guys, find Spencer and Locke. Go to your local comic shop. Get it on your pull list. David, I want to thank you for being a part of Joe on Joe.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And Shirley, you too. Thank you for being a part of Joe on Joe. And now you Joe. And Joeing is half the battle.